They knew what the Chinese Communist Party was planning, and the plan was to steal intellectual property, to steal it for the greatness of the Chinese state, to apply it to Chinese technologies, including military tech and surveillance tech, and then use it to build their own ecosystem, all while kicking out the U.S. companies or just, giving them a really hard time once they built their presence there.
Welcome to Undercurrents, our daily news show from Unheard's Washington Bureau. Today's guest is Geoffrey Cain. Make sure to subscribe over at undercurrents.tv if you want a premium experience of the show. We want you in the Undercurrents community where you can ask questions and get a premium episode every single week. We appreciate it a lot. Please make sure to subscribe here on the YouTube channel and wherever you download your podcasts as well. Thank you for helping the show out. It is really hard to know what on earth is going on with DeepSeek, a Chinese company that recently launched what we're told is a revolutionary large language model rivaling ChatGPT. Wall Street was pretty clear yesterday, though. As Forbes reported in the afternoon, quote, NVIDIA lost about $580 billion in market capitalization Monday, which would be by far the single greatest one-day value wipeout of any company in history. Let me repeat that. Of any company in history. Here's Andrew Ross Sorkin on CNBC yesterday morning.
The product overtaking ChatGPT today as that on the App Store that way. DeepSeek, which was created by a Chinese hedge fund manager, also capturing the attention of leaders, as we mentioned at the World Economic Forum last week in Davos.
We should take the development out of China very, very seriously.
What we found is that DeepSeek, which is the leading Chinese AI lab, their model is actually the top performing or roughly on par with the best American models.
If the United States can't lead in this technology, we're going to be in a very bad place geopolitically.
Mark Andreessen posted, quote, DeepSeek R1 is one of the most amazing and impressive breakthroughs I've ever seen, and as open source, a profound gift to the world. This comes as the Washington Post reports, quote, leading tech firms have spent billions building out artificial intelligence technology for sale to large businesses. Here's, of course, more from the Washington Post. Quote, Meta chief executive Mark Zuckerberg said in a Facebook post last week that his company plans to invest between $60 billion and $65 billion on AI and build a massive data center. OpenAI, Oracle, and SoftBank recently announced a Trump-supported joint venture called Stargate that seeks to spend up to $500 billion building out data centers to support AI projects. That's that big announcement you probably remember from the White House last week. Some users have tested DeepSeek's capacity for censorship on behalf of China with very predictable results about Tiananmen Square and more that mirror examples from TikTok and from some other tech products that come out of China. But it's also open source technology. Meta's top AI scientists, according to Business Insider, said, quote, it's not that China's AI is, quote, surpassing the US, but rather that, quote, open source models are surpassing proprietary ones. The author and journalist Geoffrey Cain of the Tech Integrity Project posted an interesting take to X. Quote, the bombastic success of the DeepSeek R1 large language model is a reminder of an overlooked and frightening reality. U.S. tech companies have been handing the AI keys to China for decades, he wrote. For years, Microsoft and others have been eager for market access to China. In exchange for their access, U.S. companies transfer IP and know-how to state-connected and state-affiliated Chinese firms, all while collaborating with them on AI research. So just to put this straight, the timeline over the last week is that Trump announced essentially an AI industrial policy with a bunch of tech CEOs, and then NVIDIA plunged a few days later because it looks like a Chinese company is significantly ahead of us. So then throw in Elon Musk, who's in a large legal battle with OpenAI head Sam Altman, and you have a tangled mess with massive implications. Here to help us hopefully untangle some of it is Geoffrey Cain. Geoffrey, thank you for joining us.
Good to be here, Emily.
I want to start with a really basic question, which is essentially how much can we know about DeepSeek, given that obviously the technology itself is open source, which is really interesting, but the Chinese tech industry, you've covered this for a while, is sort of notoriously shrouded in some level of mystery. Am I right in saying that? Is there, do we have genuine obstacles to understanding exactly sort of the process that took place before this LLM launched?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. The Chinese tech industry is opaque. There are lots of government bodies, government agencies that are involved in these types of AI developments. We're not sure if that's the case here with DeepSeek, but there's still a lot more. This is a very recent announcement. The stock sell-off was just this morning. There's still a lot that we don't know, and that probably won't come out for a few weeks simply because of the opaqueness of the Chinese tech ecosystem. So just to give one example, the number that people are saying, a $6 million AI algorithm training, that's an incredibly small amount, but we don't really know what the full costs, the full investments were behind this project. 6 million, certainly, doable in today's age, but $6 million, it could be a lot more. It could be millions upon millions. It could be, probably not up into the hundreds of millions. But we don't know how much more money went into research and development and other costs, with this company. So we have to wait and see for all that. It's not worth panicking about right now, but it's certainly worrying what's been happening.
Yeah, okay, so that seems to be a really interesting point, or a really important point, which is that the genius of DeepSeek right now is apparently that it can do really advanced work on with like less computing capacity or less processing capacity. Is that right? Like, tell us a little bit more about what's so special here.
Yep. So one of the big challenges with AI is that it is so energy intensive. It requires so much computing power, or what they call it in the industry, it's called compute. It requires vast amounts of chips, which are called GPUs. These are the types of advanced chips that are used to create these large language models. So it's not like the type of technology where we have windmills and green energy and that sort of thing. It requires vast amounts of energy that some people argue wouldn't even exist right now with the technology that we have. I mean, there are lots of hedge funds out there that are betting against AI because they've thought that the technology is going to hit its peak simply because we can't produce enough computing power, we can't produce enough energy to keep it going. But what's happening now? So this is a significant development because what's happening is they've found a way to significantly reduce the compute that's needed, the costs of developing a large language model. So they're essentially democratizing AI. They're essentially taking what OpenAI has done, ChatGPT. They've taken what these American companies are done, and they've found a way to shrink the requirements so that now, anybody with some money in the bank, any investor can set out to create their own large language model. This would be it is a major disruption. This is sort of similar to what's happened with a lot of technologies in recent years. So for example, in Ukraine, the Ukrainian military has been able to improvise drones. They put together homemade drones, and they can take out with one drone an entire tank column, just light it up, blow it up. And it just goes to show that we currently live in an age in which disruptions happen fast, and technological supremacy is no longer the guarantee of success. There are lots of ways that you can be brought down with new technologies that rise quickly.
Yeah, can we talk about the timing there, just on this point about how quickly it was rising? So last week, Donald Trump announces, and we'll get to this in a moment, but this big AI investment, and it's this is huge news. His first week in office, so it's clearly a priority for the Trump administration. And Nvidia plunges on Monday, the Monday after his inauguration, so exactly a week after his inauguration. My understanding is that DeepSeek is gaining momentum in recent days. It's like top of the App Store, but it's been out for a week plus, something like that, maybe even longer than that. Was it December? Tell us a little bit about the timeline here.
Yep. So the DeepSeek app, the large language model, was in development for 2 months total, which is such a small amount of time to create this kind of model. So OpenAI, just to compare it, OpenAI was developing its model for about 6 to 8 years back before they released the first Chat GPT, the one that caught on and that was popular. So that took vast amounts of money, vast amounts of resources, and one of the problems that OpenAI has had, and a lot of American companies have had, is that they just can't find the funding, enough money to fund these large language models. So the thinking behind Stargate, the Trump administration's project to build AI infrastructure, is that this is a way to raise funds for companies, people like Sam Altman, who struggle to raise that kind of money. It's only with the power and the resources of the federal government and the state that we can really get the resources we need to build AI. So timing on this is just incredible. So the app was already out when Stargate was announced. The DeepSeek app was already there, but nobody really knew what it was capable of yet. And so it's just incredible seeing this announcement. So a 500 to 600 billion-dollar AI infrastructure investment with three of the largest moguls in the AI field announced by the Trump administration. That's a massive, massive investment, and that's something that it's like Apollo space mission level technology investment. And then suddenly a week later, it's only a week before a small Chinese startup releases its own LLM and upends the market, just wipes all that away, causes a stock sell-off, a market panic, and raises the question, do we actually need this massive hundreds of $billions of investments in infrastructure if a small Chinese firm can do the same thing for a fraction of the cost? So I would argue that yes, we do need it because that's actually the only way to stay ahead of the game, even if we're only ahead of the game for, for a year, for 2 years, not a long time in technology terms. Even if we can stay ahead for that long, it's worth it because that's the only way that America can maintain its supremacy in the world and keep areas around the world safe, like Taiwan from invasion and other places too. So yes, I do stand behind Stargate. I think it's a great idea, but there are now a lot of critics coming at it because they're saying that it's too expensive and we don't need it when AI can be developed for a lot cheaper.
Now, where does this leave the famous feud between somebody who's close with China, but very close with Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and Sam Altman? And obviously you're nodding as I ask this question because it's the obvious one. It's like, I don't know if
Yeah.
it's the elephant in the room, but Elon Musk famously broke with Altman over the question of open source, or the question of whether it was nonprofit or for profit. Altman wanted to take OpenAI in the for profit direction. And now Elon Musk, who is, again, close to both China and very close to Donald Trump, in a position of great influence in this administration, which essentially just announced an industrial policy. I don't know if it's fair to say that. I mean, it seems like that's what was announced. So where does I should add the chief AI guy at Meta today said that this is a big win for open source, for the open source method. That's what we're really seeing win the day. So all of those different variables, can you help us untangle them and understand domestically how our AI industry might react to this?
So many competing ways of looking at this. Elon Musk is somebody who has his own AI ambitions, but who also has many business interests in China. I would say most notably with Tesla, which has a huge operation in China. Elon Musk is somebody whose public position on China isn't always clear because he doesn't really state it. But when push comes to shove, he's more likely to, push for some kind of cooperation with China to maintain his market access. That's just how this works. It's just the reality of doing business with China. Many U.S. companies have done business with China. Many of these U.S. companies, so Microsoft is a good example. Apple has also done quite a bit there, but Microsoft is a company that has fueled much of the rise of China's AI industry. They're one of the biggest investors with one of the biggest presences in China when it comes to AI. And they even actually had a dispute not long ago with a Chinese company that was involved in AI because they were abusing one of these AI models that Microsoft was renting out to them. So this company was trying to use it. And by the way, this company was ByteDance, which is at the parent company of TikTok. They were trying to create their own AI model using American AI models, which was against the rules of that contract. So whenever American companies go to China, they do tend to get built and messed with. It is unfortunate, but there are other developers. So people like Mark Andreessen, major investor, who are more pro-America, more about pro-American building, and there are companies like Anduril and Palantir, which are very much in the pro-Western camp. They want to see the rebuilding of American technology and industry, and they don't want to cede ground to China. So I think that that's all good. I mean, it's a good sign that things have been moving in that direction for a while now. And also famously, Mark Zuckerberg, who used to visit China, I mean, he speaks Chinese. pretty good Chinese actually, and has visited China on many instances. He has not been able to get Facebook access to China. It's been blocked, and so Facebook has pretty much given up on the country. So going over all this, there are many different competing visions for what this relationship should be between the US and China. And now that a Chinese startup has leapt ahead, just literally, leapfrogged beyond what anybody thought was possible in such a short amount of time. Now suddenly, the American industrial titans, the tech titans, I think, are on alert, and they're realizing that they need to stay even further ahead of the game because they're not as comfortable as they thought they once were.
Are you ready to jumpstart your health in 2025? Meet Lumen, the world's first handheld metabolic coach. Lumen is a small, cutting-edge device that measures your metabolism through your breath. So interesting. Using the Lumen app, you'll learn whether your body is burning fat or carbs at any given moment. But it doesn't stop there. Lumen provides tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workout, sleep, and even stress management. And it's easy. Just breathe in your Lumen each morning to see what your metabolism needs. Then get a daily nutrition plan that is tailored to you. You can also check in before and after meals or workouts for real-time tips to stay on track. Your metabolism is your body's engine, and keeping it healthy means better energy, fitness, sleep, and weight management. Lumen even adjusts to hormonal changes like your cycle or menopause so you can maintain balance and feel your best. Take control of your health this year. Visit lumen.me/undercurrents for 20% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/undercurrents for 20% off. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. Yeah, Andreessen called this a Sputnik moment, and for the United States. And my understanding is that Andreessen's vision for a kind of just AI policy would be to foster competition rather than allowing the government to sort of consolidate and have power and influence over one or two different companies for the reasons that, under the Biden administration, it was about security. And there are very legitimate national security concerns here. Can you tell us a little bit about those and how we balance that with the need for competition? Or maybe this is the type of industry where it's impossible and you have to have some type of common carrier philosophy extended into it. I'm not saying that is the answer. I'm just saying that's part of the discourse. What do you think about that?
So when it comes to frontier AI models, and we're talking about the AI models that one day might require an advanced technology like quantum computing to actually work. I mean, these are very cutting edge models that we don't really understand what they can do yet. It's really only, I think, going to be the power of the federal government, the resources that it has, that's going to be able to push those forward, into the realm of military use. The private sector is the innovator. That's where the ideas come from. But ultimately, with Stargate, you're something like Stargate, something of that scale. You're going to have the administration throw its weight, throw its resources behind these companies. Now, that said, we do need the free market, and the free market especially works in areas where companies are just failing, and maybe there's a reason they're failing. And I'll just give you a specific example here. So before Stargate, the previous administration, the Biden administration, was really a champion of what was called the CHIPS Act, which was a major government initiative to fund the semiconductors industry in the U.S. The goal was to make sure that we could manufacture our chips, and then that would allow us to keep the lead in AI and other cutting edge technologies. Now, one of the companies that received a lot of CHIPS Act money, I don't remember how much, but it was a significant amount, was Intel. The CEO of Intel, Pat Gelsinger, resigned. There was frustration with his leadership. Intel was a struggling company. And I even went to Taiwan a couple of years ago and went to so there's another Taiwanese company called TSMC, which is the most successful semiconductor company in the world, also a beneficiary of the CHIPS Act. They're making a fab plant in Arizona. They've been manufacturing, all kinds of stuff with American help, with American money. And here's what it goes to show. A Taiwanese firm is way ahead of a U.S. firm. The U.S. firm is struggling. They can't get their act together. Intel has been falling apart. And meanwhile, a foreign company, it's an ally of America. It's not like we're funding an enemy. They're able to come here and do the work for us, on our dime, partially because they're just doing such a better job at it. It's just a better run company. So this is an example of the free market getting skewed because Intel took taxpayer money and then failed. They simply couldn't make the chips that they promised. Whereas suddenly, the Taiwanese are at the top of their game and they're helping us rebuild our industry. So, kind of a mix of success and failure. It's unfortunate that it didn't work out with Intel, but that's why we need the free market to decide what companies win and which ones lose.
And let me keep pulling at this national security thread because you posted on X that for years, Microsoft and others have been eager for market access to China. In exchange for their access, US companies transfer IP and know-how to state-connected and state-affiliated Chinese firms, all while collaborating with them on AI research. So could you tell us a little bit more about that point? It's a really interesting one.
Yep. So one of the big, I would say one of the big culprits behind China's technological rise, as I found out when I lived in China, was not merely Chinese firms, but US firms. American big tech companies were promised a bill of goods. They said this was back in the high age of globalization, 20 to 30 years ago. They were promised a bill of goods that if they entered China, China would eventually change. It would become more democratic. It would become more open. The people would become wealthier and more prosperous. And one day we would see a better China, a more prosperous China that could become maybe a US ally or could become some kind of major technological partner. That world never came to exist. It was an absolute lie. And the people who were in China, journalists in China, government officials, I've spoken to a number of them in China, they all knew that this wasn't going to happen. They knew what the Chinese Communist Party was planning, and the plan was to steal intellectual property, to steal it for the greatness of the Chinese state, to apply it to Chinese technologies, including military tech and surveillance tech, and then use it to build their own ecosystem, all while kicking out the U.S. companies or just, giving them a really hard time once they built their presence there. So we've seen the reverse thing happen, and now it's sad that it's come to this, but now here in America, American companies, big tech companies, they won't say anything about China in public because they're so terrified of angering the Chinese Communist Party and then losing their market access or having some major, regulatory attack in China that the CCP will open investigations into them and arrest people and fire them and so forth. They're just terrified of the Chinese Communist Party power and they self-censor in a democracy in America to please the CCP. So one of the problems in this field that we're talking about today, with Chinese AI, with what's happening over there, we can't have an open discussion about this in America because American companies refuse to stand up to an authoritarian, hostile regime. They want to keep the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, happy while they keep the Trump administration happy. They think they can have it both ways, but ultimately they're finding increasingly that they have to choose a side. It's one or the other. Your flag is either America or China, and you can't have it both ways.
Mm. Geoffrey Cain, this is so interesting. Thank you for coming here to analyze it. We really appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me, Emily.
One of the themes that I've been watching in the first week of the Trump administration, the second week of Trump administration, and I think is going to be pretty significant moving forward is whether Trump has co-opted the tech CEOs or whether they've co-opted him. And we've thought about this a lot in the context of just partisan politics, right? Like Mark Zuckerberg was an active Democratic donor over many years and now seems to be cozying up to Donald Trump. The same is true of Silicon Valley more broadly, as actually Mark Andreessen has talked about and recently talked about in an interview that it was with Ross Douthat of the New York Times that, in Silicon Valley, it was just like, we're good Democrats. That's where we give our money to. And it's been completely exploded, he says, by the Biden administration. But it all makes the stakes so important, and we are left kind of trying to read the tea leaves and rely on really good reporting and do really good reporting to figure out exactly what's happening, because you can see when Nvidia is dropping in one day like $580 billion, how important, consequential even these like small statements are, but especially when Donald Trump gathered all of these CEOs at the White House last week and talked about Stargate. So it's just so, I think, easy to lose context in the news cycle, or lose the bigger picture, lose the forest for the trees in the context of a news cycle. But this one is to not see the forest for the trees in this case would be just a total error that could lead us down really dangerous paths, like this myopia that we've seen in other cases. And so I wonder how much of Donald Trump's calculus, bringing these, formerly hostile CEOs into his fold, is purely partisan, but how much of it also could be genuinely like a national security chess move. And it's possible, I don't know how they see it. I don't know what their internal conversations are. It's obviously better for them to be in good with the president of the United States and to get potential public resources and access to it, and to stave off any regulatory challenges. I mean, all of that is understandable, but this is happening in the broader landscape of geopolitics and a potential, hopefully not, conflict, hot, kinetic, violent conflict between two great powers. And so all of this, I think, is just Taiwan's involvement, as Geoffrey pointed out. All of this is just so crucial to kind of keep the big picture in mind. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm really excited to say at the Undercurrents community, you can now send us your questions. I'm going to answer those questions. I'm really excited about that. Still get a premium episode just for paywalled subscribers every single week. And we're always really happy about those. I get to share some behind the scenes details. So please subscribe at undercurrents.tv. It's only $1 for your first month. It's awesome. It's an awesome thing to do. You get access to all kinds of cool stuff at Unheard. So thank you. Please subscribe here, wherever you get your podcasts, and of course at undercurrents.tv. And we will see you back here tomorrow with more.